All righty. Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Feliciano, and you are watching CONSERVATISH episode 158. Make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening. Make sure you share this with your less offendable friends. You can find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano. You can find me on TikTok at CONSERVATISH, or you can email conservatishpodcast@gmail.com. And it is my great privilege today to welcome our guest, Kristan Hawkins. Hello.
Hey, everyone.
You are awesome.
To be with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming very much. And I was telling you before the podcast, I was listening to your stuff over and over the last few days. No. And it was, so here's a little bit about what I do and what this show is about. So I started about 2 years ago. I was living in the Bay Area. The Bay Area is very liberal, everything has to fall in step thought-wise. And I wasn't all the way that way. I was a musician for a long time, and I still am, singer-songwriter. And so I decided I wanted to start this podcast just to humanize conservatives and humanize people from all walks of life. So I've had drag queens, I've had Proud Boys, I've had people from all walks of life on, and we talk and we listen, and it's very loose, very free form. And one of the sticking points for me has always been, like, one of the things that it sounds strange, but one of the things that was bad news to me, where I'm like, oh no, am I pro-life? I was like, oh no. Because I, for years, had these judgments about it, and I loved Carlin, and he had judgments about it, and it just seemed like, of course, it's about a women's right to blah, blah, blah. And then the more digging I did, the more I realized, oh no, that's, regardless of your religion, regardless of your political leanings, you just shouldn't kill babies. That's like a normal.
Seems easy, doesn't it?
It seems easy, seems simple. What was so obviously you host a podcast called Explicitly Pro-Life, and you are the president of Students for Life for America. Students for Life for America?
Students for Life of America, but that's good. That's close enough.
Okay. And what was your experience getting into that and starting that, or were you ever pro-choice?
I think, I grew up in a very conservative evangelical home. I wouldn't say they were politically conservative, very Union Democrat voters in West Virginia, it's very mainstream kind of normal voting patterns. But my family was always against abortion. We never really talked about abortion. So I remember at a young age, my mom taking me to, pro-life events. But when I was in high school, if you would have asked me about abortion in cases of rape, or, even if, one of my friends would have gotten pregnant and then wouldn't be able to finish school, I would have had those, I'm pro-life. Yeah, I think generally abortion's bad, but there seems to be circumstances where it's acceptable. So I think that's where the majority of America really finds themselves. I call it kind of the mushy middle. And then I was actually asked to volunteer for a pregnancy resource center when I was in high school for my summer project. And I was like, sure, I'm pro-woman. Sounds great. I had no idea it was like this anti-abortion center. It was a crisis pregnancy center, a pregnancy help center. Or now there's another name that it was CPC, and it was PRCs. Now it's PHCs. The name keeps changing, but it's the same deal. Centers that help women who are in crisis in our community. And so I remember that first day I walked in, and the women were like super excited to see me because I was, around the same age as many of the clients who were coming in the door. And so they immediately, I did all like the usual grunt work that you would give a 15-year-old intern. But then they actually started training me to counsel the women who are coming in and conduct the pregnancy tests with them and sit with them and talk with them about their options. And so that's really where I think my opinions on this issue were formed, and where I could say I really was, walked out of that pregnancy center that first day fully 100% pro-life and against abortion. And then it just, continued, that summer, and then the other additional summers I spent volunteering for that center, really solidified why I was against abortion, even in these extremely difficult circumstances.
Right. Do you feel like you were emotionally prepared at 15, 16? Seems like to walk into something that heavy,
Yeah, I mean, I was fine. I'm a pretty serious person. I think I always have been. So it didn't negatively affect me. Obviously it positively affected me in the sense of I immediately started paying attention to what was going on in the world, and really starting to look at what was happening, not just in my hometown or in my state, but nationally and around the globe. And I think it was a very big awakening moment for me. And we have students who often, high school years, early high school years is often the time where they get activated, where they finally learn, the truth about abortion, or they've had a friend who's faced unplanned pregnancy or a crisis situation, and they finally see the truth. And so I think it definitely is a key kind of activation moment for a lot of young people.
Right. Yeah, for me, a part of my growth towards it was watching the movie Unplanned a few years ago. Yeah. Knowledge messes with us, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean? Like the mushy middle you were talking about. A lot of us, I just assumed, I want girls to feel good, so I don't want to mess with their right to choose. So I guess I'm pro-choice, right? And then when you get into the knowledge about what actually happens when they're dismembering a baby when it's in the womb, you can't, I personally, because I'd love to pick your brain about this a little bit. The more I've gotten into the conservative or conservatish side of things, I've also seen a lot of people on the right side get a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Get a little bit conspiracy theorist or attach bad intentions to the other side. And I try real hard because I love humans, and I have liberal friends and I have right-wing friends and I have, crazy flat earth friends. And I just I try to imbue positive intentions from the people, even if it's misguided, positive intentions from the other side. Where do you fall, or has that changed over the years? I've heard you say that a lot of you feel like the abortion industry, maybe it's more money oriented. I don't personally feel that it's just evil and they're, trying to drink the blood of babies or whatever some of the people say or whatever. Where do you fall as far as the intention of the far left and their ideas of abortion?
Sure. Well, I think it's important, and I think what you said, it was funny when you said about conspiracy theory-ish. That's why, when we're on campuses and we're talking to people about abortion, I don't ever lead with, well, Margaret Sanger was a racist, and Margaret Sanger said this about Black people.
Right.
Her co-founding board member, Lothar Starr, is the best-selling author of this book, and he was a Grand Cyclops of the Ku Klux Klan. Like, these are things that are true, and you can go to Google and find them out, but it's not like, you don't want to lead with it because it sounds so conspiracy theory-ish, right? And so I think it's hard because a lot of people do see that they believe that Planned Parenthood truly believes that they're helping women. I think from what we know and the folks that we've met who worked in the abortion industry, Abby, who's a good friend of mine, the story of Unplanned was about her life, and others. They got into working at Planned Parenthood not because they hated women, not because they wanted to chop up babies or kill human beings, because they thought they were helping women. They truly thought that they were going to do something that was helping women, and that gave them like the moral high ground when it came to this issue. And that even if they were uncomfortable with abortion, that wasn't really one of the main things that they were doing. It's just like this little side gig that happens when the woman gets in trouble. And what Abby has blown the lid off of on, and other former Planned Parenthood workers have, is that Planned Parenthood actually has sales quotas, that their abortion facilities have to sell X number of abortions every month. That's not somebody who's just like helping a girl out if you have a quota, right? So I think that, no, the people who work in the abortion industry, I don't think they are evil human beings with the intention that they want to kill other human beings. That said, I do think there is actual evil out there. I have met people who, I don't know where you fall on, your religious beliefs, but there is evil out there. Right. And there are people who are spiritually oppressed, and you can see certain folks that come to you and start yelling at you and screaming at you, that there is something spiritually that's taken hold of that human person.
Right.
And so I do believe in spiritual, oppression and possession. And I do think you can see, you can see, and I'm not saying, Kristen's saying that everybody works. No, I'm not saying that's everybody. And I think there's people who don't work in the abortion industry who are dealing with this as well, because obviously there's evil everywhere.
Right.
But I do think there is evil within the industry. And I think if you look at the intentions of why the industry was founded, what was the point of this contraceptive movement, which became a pro-abortion movement? Why was Planned Parenthood or the National Birth Control League founded? It was founded to make sure poor and immigrant women didn't reproduce. That's why it was founded. Because there was a belief in American society that certain people should be able to reproduce and others shouldn't be able to reproduce. And so I think you can look at the founding and say, this was the intention. Have they gone off of that? I mean, look at their business model. Look at where the majority of their abortion facilities are located and do the math. You can, a lot of the studies say it's like 79% are in walkable minority neighborhoods. And Planned Parenthood goes, well, wait a minute, we're not racist. This is just where the most need is. These poor people need our abortions. And I think it is systemic racism when you look at the entire model. So no, it's hard, right now. I don't know if you've been sure in the podcast, and I'm sorry, I have a podcast, but I don't listen to podcasts because I don't have a commute anymore. I work from home.
Don't worry, so, mine is better than all of them anyway. Don't worry.
Okay, so I don't know, what your podcast are you talking about, but like I was at the White House 3 weeks ago for the president's RNC speech. I did not want to go. Like, my husband was like, don't go because I've been quarantining myself since March. So it was like really like my coming out since March. It was like my first public event that I'd gone to since March. My husband was mad. I decided to go. My team was like, you gotta go. And I was like, why am I driving 6 hours to get there? Cause I live in Pittsburgh now, to go to DC with all these people in DC. I can't stand. It's the reason I don't live in DC anymore. And I figured out why God wanted me there, because when we left, Black Lives Matter, the organization, and their protesters were out in the streets screaming at us. I had to help an elderly man named Lou Holtz, and many people know it was like stumbling because, it was scary. Somebody could have gotten killed. That's why God wanted me there, is to endure what we had to endure when we left the White House, to see how bad it is. And I think to see the result of our abortion culture, where we have, when we think about abortion is we say, in America, that a whole group of humans might be humans according to science, but they're not human beings. They're not persons. And they don't really have the same rights because they're different than us or smaller than us, or, who their parents are. And I think that abortion culture has seeped in everywhere, because that's exactly what we endured, leaving the White House, or people were screaming at us. I was with one of my friends who was Black, and I mistakenly thought, oh, we should be safer because she's Black. They'll assume she's with them, and we don't have any like MAGA hats on or anything like that. No, it was actually more dangerous for Christina because Christina was Black and she was coming from the White House. And so the racial, insults that she had to endure. But it was interesting because they immediately dehumanized every single person who is at the White House. Mm-hmm. If you were at the White House listening to President Trump's acceptance speech for the RNC, you therefore were not a person. You didn't have dignity, and therefore it was justified for them to come up in your face, scream at you, hurl insults, curse at you, wish death, call you, racially insensitive names. And that is, the result of the tribalism that we've seen in our country, but it's the result of dehumanizing certain classes of people for decades.
Right. Yeah. My friend, Mike Harlow, you ever heard of Brandon Straka of the Walk Away campaign? Mm-hmm. So Mike Harlow works for them. He's an amazing little gay kid. And he and Brandon were leaving the RNC same night, and they were attacked, called gay slurs, all kinds of things. And this is from Black Lives Matter, apparently, who gives voice to the voiceless. It's amazing how, and I talk about this on the show all the time, if you put the personality above the principle, you don't actually believe in the principle. So like if you believe in free speech, except for, then you don't actually believe in the principle, And so I try to push.
I'm making that into a meme right now.
Yeah. See, I'm amazing. Everyone subscribe. No, it wasn't even my idea, but I've put it in this context because it really applies across the board. And that includes for me, that includes for everybody. We're all human. We all make that mistake. Especially it's so easy to do when we're trying to win an argument. The reality is that the people who I disagree with have to be allowed to have a space to share what they're talking about, to have to be heard. They have to be heard. I've been wrong so many times in my 34 years of life. And if I hadn't been heard and had a conversation with, I wouldn't really know that I was wrong. I wouldn't really know, you know what I mean? Unless someone treated me with the respect of listening to me, I wouldn't be informed, you know? What they're doing right now, especially Black Lives Matter, is really the opposite of helpful to their goal, or to all of our goal of unity and, you know, all that stuff. So the fulcrum for all this, so a couple of things. One thing that came up over and over in my head when I was watching your videos, and it's come up a couple of times on this show, but when someone who is pro-abortion comes to you and they are arguing with you, what they often do is cite anecdotal evidence or cite extreme cases. And what kept ringing in my head is that to all these things, and you put it a beautiful way of how to, you know, and you've had awesome guests on your show of how to counteract those arguments, how to listen, how to be understanding. But one of the things that I kept thinking about is that, say somebody says, well, what about in the case of rape? Even if you, Kristan Hawkins, said, okay, fine, rape is justified, they're not going to move. They want to keep pushing. It's not like, okay, cool.
It's a disingenuous argument.
Right. It's not that you go, okay, sweet. As long as we have the door open, they want to keep the door open so far just in case someone might get their feelings hurt. But what's more important, the death of a baby or someone having hard, you know what I mean? Like there's, so the fulcrum
it really is. It's a disingenuous argument. And I think that a lot of times when people who are making that argument haven't really thought about the disingenuousness of their question, right? Because it's a question they've heard other people maybe stumble over it. So it's like an instinctual, well, what about rape? Okay, well, let's talk about rape and we'll have that conversation. But even if you're right, even if I would concede and say, fine, babies who are conceived in rape, some babies don't matter because of who their dad is. Okay, fine. Now, what about 97%? Not well, with rape, it would just be 99% of the other cases. Would you? And they say no. So then you can. There was a book written. It's actually here on my bookshelf. I think it's like finding common ground without compromise, I think it's called. It's by Steve Wagner. He works for Justice for All, JFA. And it's an interesting book because the way Steve wrote it out, he's a pro-life apologist and he's a brilliant debater. He lectures on campuses. And the way Steve broke it down was like, here's 10 questions that you can ask pro-abortion people to build common ground with them. Because I mean that really is the problem, right? When, you know, Josh Brahm, another apologist, I don't know who he quotes, but he works for a group called Equal Rights Institute, and he says, you know, when people ask you that rape question, they're not really asking you about the humanity of the child. They're asking you, are you human? Like, do you have humanity? Like, how are you going to respond to that question? And so I think it's important. I like what Steve wrote about, you know, if you really are having a one-on-one conversation with someone and you are trying to move them, try to find places of common ground. You know, do you think abortion should be legal as a method of birth control? That a woman can go and have as many abortions as she wants? Most people are going to say no. Right. Do you think, and go, great, I agree with you. Why? Why do you think abortion shouldn't, why can't a woman have 12 abortions a year? You know, do you think abortion should be legal because the mother doesn't like the gender of her child, that she only wants a boy? Are you comfortable with saying that it's okay for her to kill little girls because she doesn't want one? And so you try to find like issues and areas where you can agree with them because you want them to see you as a human who cares about other humans, because you don't want them immediately to believe that you don't really care. All you want to do is control women's bodies, and you don't give a damn about anybody else. And so I think that's why we have Explicitly Pro-Life podcast, because my team doesn't believe I can get through a podcast without cursing. But
no, this is hard for me, by the way. No,
yeah.
By the way, for the people who found this podcast because of Kristan, just know if you listen to my other stuff, I'm a little too liberal for the conservatives. I'm a little too conservative for the liberal. Just prepare yourself. That's all.
I like that. When both sides are mad at me about something, I know I've done something right.
Yeah.
So I think that's good. But yeah, no, I do think you have to find common ground. Like our motto on campuses when we're starting groups is belong, believe, behave, right? Because like you have to realize that somebody actually has to like you if they're going to ever listen to anything that you say. If they think you're a jerk, they're never going to listen to anything. Now, it's a little bit different when you go on campuses. And so like if I'm there and I have a speech and there's 150 people and there's protesters, I'm not going to ever like get this relationship with the person asking me the question. What I'm going to do is basically ask them questions to have them point out to everybody listening the illogical position of their argument and try to win over people who are listening, the mushy in the middle who were too afraid to come ask me a question. That's much different than me on a one-on-one conversation with somebody.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly kind of what it is for me too on social media. I've had, tons of times someone will say, I disagree with that. And then I'll have a conversation. I'll get into it with them. I'll try to, especially one of the things is because I'm half Puerto Rican. I've had a number of people try to get me on identity politics. And then I just put it right back. Well, what about this? What about half of my blood? What is that? Does that count for anything? Am I hating myself? But if they come in swinging, if they come in, you're an evil, blah, blah, then I'm happy to just run them around in circles and just, put it right back in their face. I'm not going to engage with someone who's already covered their ears,
Yeah.
What are some of the experiences I kind of want to get into? Let's get into this first. You have, the crux of this, the fulcrum is whether or not it's a baby, whether or not it's.
Absolutely. The bottom line in every debate about abortion. I was actually, the reason I was late for us to do this podcast was I was having this debate with a team member of, when do we call ourselves pro-life or do we call ourselves anti-abortion? Because let me tell you, the challenge is pro-lifers like to call themselves pro-life because it's positive. We like our term, right? We like it. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking to a social justice Catholic, maybe somebody who doesn't like abortion, but really hates Donald Trump, and is looking for every excuse not to vote for Donald Trump in this election, you will hear the word thrown back into your face. Well, you say you're pro-life. What about those kids in cages? Oh, actually, I'm against that. And by the way, that was President Obama's administration, and that was stopped. Well, when you answer that question, well, what about this? And then you answer that, right? So what they keep doing is throwing that term up, because pro-life, the term pro-life was founded to be this anti-abortion term. It was actually more in the, like anti-contraception and turned into more anti-abortion term. Like that's why pro-life, that's why we have this term pro-life and why the other side call themselves pro-choice, which Planned Parenthood won't even call themselves pro-choice anymore because polling shows pro-choice is related and top of the mind with the word abortion, which they know top of the mind. People don't like the word abortion. It gives them icky feelings. So Planned Parenthood uses reproductive rights now. So for us, it's fine because we know what it means. But for a lot of people, mushy middles, when you ask them what pro-life means, they instantly get a negative reaction. They think of somebody on a street corner yelling at women going into Planned Parenthood, showing graphic images. I mean, like I've done $150,000 worth of research this year on this to like verify and back up. These aren't just like Kristan's feelings. Like this is like data, right? Right. So it's hard because our people like it. But then when you get into this, but what I like about calling ourselves anti-abortion is one, I'm proud, like I'm anti-smoking. I'm like the most liberal person when it comes to smoking. Like I get into more fights with my friends about smoking. And so like I'm anti-smoking, I'm anti-sex trafficking, I'm anti-child labor, I'm anti-drunk driving. Like, yes, it's a negative to say you're anti-abortion, but I'm proud of that negative. And what I like about saying it is it gets to the issue immediately. Right. Like, fine. If you want to argue with me and try to make pro-life into being 30 different things, whatever. But I'm going to tell you, when it comes to this election, this presidential election, there is one candidate who we know who has done things that will dramatically lower abortion and could get us closer to an abortion-free America. And there's one candidate who is promising to do all that he can to make sure that every single taxpayer in America fund abortions through the 9th month. So you tell me which person you want to vote for. You want to vote for the pro-abortion candidate or anti-abortion candidate? I think it gets us back to that issue faster than having to go through everything else with pro-life. Just saying, look, I'm anti-abortion. I'm voting anti-abortion. Right. Who are you? What are you voting for? Are you voting for the pro-abortion, and no one likes to call themselves pro-abortion, by the way. They get very angry if they call themselves if you call them pro-abortion, because everybody instinctively knows there's something wrong with the word abortion. Like, even the people who support it don't want to call themselves pro-abortion, which leads my next question to be is, if you support it, why are you afraid to put your name beside of it? Just be proud that you're pro-abortion. So
they've tried to do that. Yeah, they've tried to do that. What's her face? The annoying girl who did that show, Girls from New York.
Lena Dunham.
Lena Dunham. Do you listen to Camille Paglia?
A little bit. I read a little bit. I don't listen. Once again, I don't.
Yeah, I love her to death. She's very smart. She went on this rant about Lena Dunham. It's gorgeous. If you ever.
Oh no! I mean,
like a minute
Girls
long.
is supposed to be this feminist show, and it's like, I try to watch it. I mean, it's extremely. I mean, it's actually sad. It makes you feel sad for these women that you're not liberated.
Right.
Like, you live a lonely, desperate, messed up life. Like, if this is what feminism was supposed to get you, then you've been wronged.
Right. And so Lena Dunham said, well, I wish I had had an abortion, blah, blah, blah. They're going against. So one of the things that I've always thought about, or one of the reasons why I was so, well, of course I'm pro-choice for years and years and years, was that same idea of, well, the label, the moniker of pro-life means you are willing to, kill abortion doctors, or you are bothering people on the street, or you are, stuffy and boring and blah, blah, blah. But I really think, because of knowledge and because of social media and because of your work, to tell you the truth, I see and over these young kids, getting up, these, pretty people like me getting up, and saying, yeah, I'm pro-life or I'm anti-abortion as well. And it's changing things. And again, that idea that it's a life is kind of the fulcrum here. And when someone says it is just a clump of cells, what is the first thing you go to? What is the first weapon in your arsenal?
Well, I'm a clump of cells. Can you kill me?
I like that.
Depends on how sassy I'm feeling.
Right.
I mean, that's okay, sure. A fetus, an embryo, a baby, an infant, a toddler, an adolescent are all clumps of cells. The question is, what's the value you're assigning to those clump of cells? And science is very definitive that at the moment of conception, a co-living life has been created that will never exist before again, and has never existed before that moment. So I mean, that's like the start of this new being, right? That's this origination point that happens. And so the question is, well, what clumps of cells do you think should have rights? Are you saying that there's functional abilities that you have to have in order to be a person? Because that's a slippery slope for you, right? You're going to join the Supreme Court that issues Dred Scott to say only certain people and their, skin color, how dare you, And
well, not even that. They've also said, well, if it's not a viable, meaning they're not going to have a good, so people in poverty should be killed. What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
It's really, it's an illogical position that they've taken, and they really can't defend the position. Like, there is no defense, and they always end up on a slippery slope and then jumping off of it at some point. And so because really our argument in the anti-abortion or pro-life movement, whatever you want to call us, is very simple, is that at the moment of conception, it's a human being, and that human being has the same rights, is on the same footing as you and I. Like, we have a very simple platform in the pro-life community. We don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops and weave all these stories. It's just very simple for us, and we try to keep it very simple. And they're not able to do that. And the thing is, none of them, no pro-abortion advocate or leader or theologian or philosopher, none of them actually have decided on when the definitive point is. They all have different points. Their whole thing is, well, we don't really know. You literally had a U.S. senator just probably in the last 10 years, I think it was Barbara Box before she left, said that it wasn't a baby until you took it home from the hospital. So wait a minute, before I put the baby in the car seat and was walking out of the door of the hospital, it would have been okay to kill my child. Like, really? That's how far you are willing to go? I mean, this is a sitting U.S. senator at a U.S. Senate hearing who made this remark. It wasn't like an offhanded remark and it was gotcha journalism and it was, undercover. Like, she said this publicly in front of cameras. Right. So they don't actually have a defining point. They can't. And the best they do, the best they can do is they say, well, we don't know. Science isn't definitive. And that, first of all, that is not true. Science is definitive. Something went from non-existing to existing when sperm and egg united. Right. What you're choosing to say is that existence doesn't have the same value, but in some regards it does, because if she's pregnant and she wants to have the baby and her husband murdered her, like in California, the Lacey and Connor Pearson law, that baby matters, and that's considered double homicide. But if she was on her way to the abortion facility, if Lacey Pearson was like, oh, I'm going to have an abortion, should her husband have been charged for murdering the baby? Because
anybody pro-choice, you can ask them, if your friend came to you and said, I had a miscarriage, would you be sad for her? Would you say, don't trip, relax? Yeah. Or would you be sad for her? Why are you sad for her? Almost every single, I posted a thing about 6 months ago with something pro-life. And essentially I was saying, like, I'm upset, or I was upset, in a jokey kind of tongue-in-cheek way, that I'm realizing that I'm a bit pro-life, you know what I mean? And I'm happy having this happen. The only two people who said anything were two women. And neither one of them, and maybe this is just because I'm a charming man, but neither one of them said, I don't want you to have a say. They both said, well, as a woman who has had an abortion, I have these feelings and I don't feel comfortable with you having these feelings, but I don't think you should be not allowed to say it just because you have a penis. And number two, it was a harrowing experience. It was a horrible experience for them. Mm-hmm. Why? Were these two women, and there were a lot of them, or there are a lot of them I've watched. You can go to Georgette Forney, thank you. Yep. Go to the website Abortion Confessions or Abortion
Silent. It's Silent No More Awareness is their website, but I think they have this whole. I don't know what the second website is, but they have all of the testimonies of the women.
Yeah, and there's thousands of women talking about how hard it was physically, how hard it was emotionally, how they're still, and that cannot just be because pro-life people have made them feel shame. No, it's because it's a living thing that dies, and you feel sad. You know what I mean? And dang it, I want to also point this out too. One of the things that kept coming up for your group and from you as well, is this idea of what pro-life really is. I haven't seen, from the work that I've done, and obviously I had these ideas about pro-life people, or anti-abortion people for years. I have not seen any of them go, okay, good, you had an abortion. I haven't seen any of them go, okay, good, you didn't have an abortion, done. Or like, or you had an abortion, screw you. I've never seen any of that. I've seen only, oh, you didn't have an abortion, let's try to help. Let's try to work on other options. Let's try to, if you're gonna say choice, then that means what are the other options? What are the other choices? Because a lot of these pro-choice people are just on that. They're not big on talking about care afterwards. They're not big on helping women, make these decisions, providing opportunities, providing a shelter, providing this, providing, you guys are really on that tip. You know what I mean? And that takes a lot of work. That takes sacrifice for someone else. That takes vulnerability to put yourself out there. And so number one, obviously I appreciate that. And number two, what are the aftercare or other options that you mainly push and mainly offer these women to talk to these women about?
Yeah. So when we're on campuses, and obviously we get accused this all the time. If you really were pro-life, weren't you helping? I'm like, where have you been? Like Google, option line, look for a pregnancy resource center. Like that's all us. Like I don't see pro-choice people out there, having like these little buildings. Oh, wait a minute. That's Planned Parenthood. That, that basically, are supposed to be helping women make choices and know that they have a choice. The only choice that you are presented with on their side is to have an abortion. We're the ones who do, on campuses, we have something called Pregnant on Campus program where we're hosting panels, or we're meeting with the Women's Health Center to make sure there's brochures in the Women's Health Center. So the pregnancy resource centers or the government funded community healthcare clinics are actually advertised in the campus health center. And it's not just leading her to a Planned Parenthood. We're the ones who create the Pregnant on Campus scholarships and fundraise for them and give scholarships to pregnant and parenting women on campuses. We're the ones petitioning the government to make the student government to get, diaper changing stations in male and female bathrooms. So that's us. That's not the pro-choice group on like a college campus. In the broader community, if you go to optionline.org, you'll get a list. You can put in your zip code, and it'll populate a list of all the pregnancy resource center clinics in the country. And it'll also give you a list of the adoption agencies. And I think it also gives you maternity homes. So these are places where women who are pregnant or after they've had a child, the women and their children, and sometimes they're, if they have other children, can also go and live if they're homeless. That is all the pro-life community. And that's our entire movement. That's what we do. Yes, there are people like me who are the activists who go out and speak truth, but the vast majority of people who serve in the pro-life movement, that's what they do, is the on the ground, boots on the ground community activism, which is helping her. There is like not one place, like if you go into any pregnancy resource center in the country and you say, I don't want to have this abortion, but I have this problem, this problem, this problem. That center, like they will stop everything that they're doing and come around you and say, okay, you need a job. All right, we'll send out an email to our list to figure out who has a job. You need healthcare. Okay, great. We know a pro-life doctor down the street. So even while we're waiting for you to get signed up for state Medicaid, we'll make sure you get checked out. Like that's what the pro-life movement does. Like that's the entire point of these centers, is to save lives. And that means saving the mom at the same time. So it is totally disingenuous. And I think that's, once again, it speaks to the pro-life movement's brand problem, and it's different because the pro-life movement isn't, Planned Parenthood is a $2 billion a year industry. They gross over $150 million in profit as a nonprofit, by the way. They get over $600 million from us taxpayers every single year. So they are like the Goliath of the abortion industry. So there's other there's NARAL, Pro-Choice for America, which by the way was founded by two men. One was abortionist, and those two men convinced Betty Friedan to put abortion into the second edition of Feminist Mystique. But whatever. So there's these like littler groups, but mainly it's Planned Parenthood, and they kind of run the gamut on like the marketing of the abortion industry, and they spend tens of millions of dollars a year on their movement's branding and how their movement is seen. The pro-life movement isn't like that. It wasn't, there was one group, National Right to Life, that was started, and there was Americans United for Life, and then there was another group, and then it went to communities. So it's a lot more grassroots, which, I think it's great because if, one group shuts down or has poor leadership, it's, or like the government tries to, especially in like California, shut down a certain group. It's like whack-a-mole. You can put one, but you're not going to, there more will pop up in its place. And I think it actually helps us, but I think it hurts us in the sense of we're not very good marketers of who we are. There's no like national billboard campaign to say, we're the pro-life movement. We served 175,000 pregnant women this year and say, like, there just isn't that. There's individual pregnancy centers. I'll say, we served 5,000 clients this year and we saved 65 children from, chemical abortions when their mom called us to reverse the chemical abortion. Like, you have individual metrics like that, but there's not one entity. And if someone gave me $1 billion and I'm searching for this person to end abortion, I would put probably 900 million of it into PR. Honestly, I would, because we have a winning argument. You said earlier, you saw unplanned. When I was watching the RNC and looking at tweets, and like Ari Fleischer, who was, he was the press secretary for President Bush. This man is a well-educated man, knows like everything. He's on Twitter when Abby Johnson's speaking at the RNC going, I had no idea this is what happens in abortion. And I'm like, what? You're a Republican. You've been to you guys just ignore us because people do ignore pro-lifers because we talk about something that nobody wants to talk about. And it's so frustrating.
I will say, as much as the conservatives, or, you've talked about it a couple of times, even on this show, about your team being like, hey, calm down, don't say those words, blah, blah, blah.
Can you tell why they have to say this to me? I don't know.
I kind of think we need blunt tools sometimes. You know, my big bald head is a blunt tool. You know what I mean? I think part of the reason that the Black Lives Matter people in the left or whatever is because they're good at branding. These are Hollywood people.
And they're good at using blunt tools.
Yes. And they of course you would be for a woman's right to choose. Of course you would think that Black Lives Matter, regardless of the, you know, Black people who have died in the protests. Like, you know, of course, there's an of courseness. And there sometimes needs to be people like you, you know, people like me, I'm really humble, coming in and just going, you know what? No, absolutely not. Blunt tool, just knocking everybody down. Because for a long time, people who have been on the right or have been more conservative or conservatish have been boring or stuffy or like numbers oriented. And numbers oriented is important, but we also need to be engaging.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. You know, there are pro-lifers who cannot stand me, right?
Really?
That, Kristan, you're too mean. Like, why would you say that to a pro-choice person? But I'm like, well, you're not my audience. It's okay. I got other liberals. I have liberals on my staff. Go watch one of my liberals on staff, and they're amazing, and you'll like them. You know, like
Right.
You have to realize that there are a lot of different approaches, and there are things that I will say that will convert someone and change your mind, but for other people it's not going to work because every single person's different, and people are usually, you know, they're all at different places in their lives. And I always talk to our students about, you know, you want to plant seeds. It's very rare that someone's going to come up to you and say, oh my gosh, you are completely right, I have been completely wrong on this issue. That's not going to happen a lot. Most people will say, okay, you've given me something to think about. That on campus is usually the best response you can get, that someone is acknowledging that maybe they need to consider what you just said. That's good. Most of the time it's going to be like, yeah, right, whatever, and they walk away. And so you kind of hope, did it stick? Like, is what, you know, and you don't know, like, you don't know what the conversation they're going to have with their roommate. You don't know what the conversation is going to come up in the classroom. And you just don't know, you know, the seeds you've planted, when they're going to be germinated, when they're going to, you know, finally start coming to life. And you probably won't even be there for it. Like, I've had people come to me like, oh my gosh, you completely changed my mind. And my first thought is, well, I probably didn't. Somebody else did. But it took you hearing it from me just the exact way I said it that made you finally say, okay, fine, I'm in, you know? And so that was probably the result of somebody else's work. So I think, yeah, there's a place for all of us in the pro-life movement. You don't have to like me or the way I word things or what I say to be a part of the pro-life movement or to get out and do it, because not every pro-lifer needs to be like me at all, nor do I recommend it.
Everybody needs to like me, so I'm just desperate for
I don't know. I'm 35 now. I'm very comfortable with people not liking me.
I know, right? Isn't it great?
It doesn't bother me at all.
I'm like, you know what? No, I know who I am. I don't need you. You know, it's great.
Yeah.
Are you down to go maybe 10 more minutes?
Sure, 10 more minutes.
Okay,
I was late.
That's okay. So as far as I do want to touch on two things. You said that where do you see the differences, if you can expound a little bit more on why Trump would be a better candidate versus why Biden would be a candidate for anti-abortion?
Supreme Court.
Okay.
Supreme Court, Supreme Court, Supreme Court. I believe we are 1 to 2 votes away from reversing Roe. We actually have 5 pro-life justices right now, but one is a pansy and will not vote to reverse Roe versus Wade because he will not want to cause waves. Conservatives tend to be annoying like that. They don't, they're very traditionalist, right? And so, but I think we have 4 that would vote to reverse Roe. Reversing Roe, just for your audience, means that the decision of abortion will go back to the states, how it was 1973. Right. So it doesn't mean abortion is going to be illegal everywhere. California, for sure, you know, it'll still be legal. Illinois. But there will be states that we have them ranked. We know which ones they are. There'll be about 10 states that move to make abortion illegal immediately. And then there'll be about 30 states we start fighting in and start battling in. That is a huge step for us in the pro-life movement, is to get these 7 men on the Supreme Court and their faulty decision 1973 reversed and allow states to make these decisions. If you have a Biden presidency, we know with 100% certainty from his statement and Kamala Harris's statement that they will appoint only pro-abortion justices, not only to the Supreme Court, but to all the lower courts, which that's how you get, justices, right? A lot of times they come up from a district court, a U.S. appeals court, things like that. So that's number one. Now, to answer the questions of conservatives who hate Trump and say, well, that doesn't really mean anything because pro-lifers, we've been told that before, and a Republican president has appointed a justice who wasn't great. I hear you, and we have been screwed. The pro-life movement has been screwed before. We thought Justice Anthony Kennedy was going to be a pro-life vote. Now, one of his last decisions was when it came to partial birth abortion, but in the 1992 Casey v. Planned Parenthood decision, he was a swing vote, and that decision could have reversed Roe, and it didn't because of that man who we all thought and were led to believe would be a pro-life Supreme Court pick. So I'm not saying I know with 100% certainty this is what we will get, but I know from the two Supreme Court nominees, and now Judge Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh, that President Trump actually has upheld his promise to appoint only anti-abortion, pro-life Supreme Court justices. So we actually have proof. It's actually easier than in 2016, because in 2016, there was a big question of, well, is he actually pro-life? Is he really going to govern pro-life? Is he just trying to use us for votes? And there was a huge question. And I ended up voting for Trump in 2016. And the way I reasoned it, and I wrote about it publicly, was, well, look, I know with 100% certainty who we will get with a President Hillary Clinton. Even if Donald Trump does nothing for the pro-life movement and just stays quiet about it, it'll be better than what we would get. So I think you can look at the Supreme Court, number one thing. I think the other thing you can think about too is the right for pro-lifers and Christians to speak out against abortion. Kamala Harris just came out saying in the Harris administration, basically they're going to add all kinds of stuff to this RFRA law. Essentially what they're going to do is say, yeah, you have the right to practice your religion as long as it's in the church. If you once you walk out of a church or a mosque or a synagogue or wherever you're at, once you walk out of those doors, you have to shut up about your beliefs. And they have already said this in the Democratic Party when it comes to healthcare providers, nurses and doctors, that it doesn't matter if you're anti-abortion, abortion kills a human being, you should be forced to participate in abortions. Like, they will sue you or try to get you fired if you don't. And you already have Biden and Harris who publicly said they support those types of actions. So it's not even like they're going to come after us just for speaking. I fully believe they will come after groups like me. They will come after any group they can with IRS. They will come after us because they just want us to disappear.
Right. Yeah, I've already talked about it a number of times, but the reality is that under a Trump presidency, I will still most likely, I will have a better chance to be allowed to say whatever the heck I want under a Trump presidency versus Biden. There's going to be more clamping down. The more money and power they give Mark Zuckerberg and the people who run. I mean, TikTok, literally, I was talking about it a few weeks ago, but my TikTok jumped up to 10,000 followers, and I've only had it for about 5 months. And yet my Instagram, I've had it since 2014, and I have like 900.
Oh, yeah.
So that's because it's not owned by the Bay Area. And yet all of a sudden, by the way, the other day I got flagged for something. And now, even though I have 10,000 followers, my last video I posted a day ago has 25 views.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, the shadow banning is
right.
We can't take out ads on Twitter. We have the same problem on Instagram. And on TikTok, we have the same deal. We were getting video views into hundreds of thousands. And then now it's like a couple of thousand. You're like, right. How did that happen?
It's because George Carlin put it, the problem with liberals, even though he was a liberal most of his life, the problem with liberals is they think big white daddy knows best.
Yeah.
I know better than these. Big white daddy, don't worry. I'll protect you, black people or women or trans or whatever. I know what's best for these people. So I want to also wrap up just by saying, or also just by, I want to leave people, maybe with I don't know. I don't feel like I want to leave people with a vision of hope. So here's what I mean. I want people to understand, because I have somebody, her name is The Good Girl. If people haven't watched the third time, that she's an anonymous person and she's been on my show a number of times. The third episode, she talked about being 15 years old and getting sick and thinking that she had, she's been sober now a long time, but she was drinking at the time. And she talked about how she thought she had a problem with not a hernia or something. She had some abdomen problems. She went to the doctor. And the doctor said, They've got her on a bunch of pain medications because she wasn't really in pain. She's 15 years old, and this is like 90, 91, 92. They said, well, you're pregnant, so what we're going to do is give you an abortion. They just said it. So you're pregnant, so what we're going to do, and her mother, thank God, was there, and her mother was like, whoa, what are you saying we're going to? And the doctors apparently were like annoyed. Fine, I guess we won't give her an abortion. And yet, even though the good girl and other people who have been on my show are anti-abortion, they do not feel comfortable giving other people, I don't feel comfortable telling a woman she should bring. So here's how I think would be a good idea to end the show, or a good idea to, let's talk about the absolute truth when it comes to what happens during the process of an abortion.
Sure. I think one, it's really interesting when someone says they don't feel comfortable telling someone else not to have an abortion, because they would never say that with anything else. Oh, I don't feel comfortable. I'm against abusing my child, but I don't feel comfortable going up to my neighbor and telling them he should stop smacking his son in the face.
Yeah.
No, I would feel completely comfortable going up to my neighbor and then calling, every agency I could, because we understand that child that is being smacked around is a human being and doesn't deserve to be treated that way, no matter what he might have said to his father, right? And we would never say that on any other type of abuse, but we say it with abortion because we don't understand. We think we understand what happens in abortion, but we don't. If we saw the broken bodies of 2,500 babies on the streets every night in the nightly news, we would absolutely, when it came to voting, we would vote to end that. We wouldn't say, well, abortion is just one of the issues, but pro-life really means like 50 other things, and I have to weight them all equally. No. If we actually knew what happens inside of an abortion facility and understood how big of a problem this was, that nothing kills more people every single day than abortion, we would all be united in stopping that. But it's because it hides behind closed doors. It's because the abortion industry uses euphemisms like, reproductive choice, that we can feel comfortable in not speaking up. But the reality is, at every single abortion, a life is ended. The goal of the abortionist when they walk into that room is that a beating heart stops beating. That is the only way an abortionist knows success in their job. If a beating heart stops beating. Do you want me to show you actually what happens in abortion? I have some tools here.
Yes, please.
I didn't know I should have had them ready for you, but.
No, I appreciate you.
So this is a 12-week fetal model. I think it's a little big for lifelike size. The point is that a lot of people don't realize, though, at this point, so this is the end of the first trimester, a child has all his or her limbs. The child actually has fingerprints. If she's a girl, by 8 weeks, every single egg that she'll ever have that will be released from her ovary, she already has. Like, I didn't know that until a few months ago. I thought that was fascinating. So these abortions are done usually with a vacuum. It's a machine that's about 12 times more powerful than a vacuum machine. It's a vacuum aspiration where they go in and they essentially just suck. And the child either comes out in whole or the child will come out in pieces. And then they'll use something like this called a curette. You'll see it has like a little loop on it. Mm-hmm. And the curette is just used to scrape the lining of the uterus to make sure the placenta, the organ that supports the child that develops, and all the fetal parts are removed from the mother's uterus. And usually they'll use ultrasound technology while they're sucking and while they're using the curette to make sure everything is gone. Now, there's also something right now called that the abortion industry is really pushing, and this is like their new novel approach. It's a chemical abortion. It's 2 pills. And it induces a miscarriage. So they don't even call it abortion. They say, we're just going to induce a miscarriage for you, which I think is incredibly insulting to every family that's suffered the loss of a miscarriage. What that does is essentially it stops the body from making a certain hormone, which will starve the child. So the child won't be able to grow. because the child's already attached to the uterine wall, right? Because it's inside it's embedded in the uterine wall and the placenta. And then the second pill will causes contractions, and it'll cause the uterus to contract, and the child will be removed. And they tell you to sit on the toilet, flush, don't look. And that's the scene that you saw. The very powerful scene in Unplanned is a very painful chemical. It's usually called RU46 abortion. In fact, our team during COVID, we've started going into chat rooms, pregnancy chat rooms, to counsel, and we've saved like 15 babies just in the past couple months this way. Mm-hmm. And we have a 72-page book we just put together for the FDA, just of women unprompted who are going into these pregnancy chat rooms to talk about the horror of their chemical abortions, how painful they are, how lonely they are, because these chemical abortions can actually take about 2 weeks to complete. You can be bleeding heavily. This is how women die from them, because they hemorrhage to death and they don't know when to go to the hospital. So they're trying to get a majority of abortions, for 12 weeks or younger. This is easier. Chemical abortions are easier to convince doctors to commit them, because they're not actively going in with forceps and dismembering a human being. They're just prescribing a pill. When you get to the second trimester, so 13 weeks older, it gets into a dismemberment abortion. So a dismemberment abortion, they're going to use these forceps. So this is actually really a Sofer clamp, but you'll see, I don't know if you can see, there's teeth here. It's actually quite painful, and it locks. And once it locks, it doesn't let go. My husband actually came in here and was messing one day and like hurt himself, because this is very painful. This is a serrated edge. This is they say 16 weeks. I would say this is probably more about 20 weeks, fetal model. And this is what they do in these abortions. They grab and twist. So the baby will still be in breech. So they'll grab the leg, clamp, you'll hear the clamp, twist, pull, and pull down. And they'll keep doing this. They'll make passes, and they have a little tray. The head's the last thing, and they have to crush and the pull. In fact, in David DeLay in Center for Medical Progress, when he was doing those undercover work of getting the Planned Parenthood and other abortion facilities on tape haggling over the baby body parts after they abort the baby, they sell the babies for research. The abortionist in Arizona, former Planned Parenthood medical director, actually joked that she had to go to the gym to work out her biceps because this action, the skull, because the skull is so well formed at 21 weeks, she was still committing abortions using this method that she was having to work out, because it was so much required so much to crush the baby's skull.
Just to pause you, what's if people wanted to look up what that video is?
So it's called, the organization called the Center for Medical Progress. You can go to YouTube. They also have a website. So it's basically a pro-life activist went undercover for years and embedded himself and some others into the abortion industry. And what's happening is getting rid of babies is really difficult. They don't actually know how to get rid of all the babies. They use waste disposal services. Some of them cremate. There's a weird thing where they have like a dishwasher where they'll put the babies in a dishwasher with other tissue, and then they put the special chemical in to dissolve the tissue, and it goes through the drain. Others have a cincerator. So like, my garbage disposal, they'll just put the babies through going into our public water system. This is literally the problem. So David actually went to a National Abortion Federation conference there in California and attended a session. We, Students for Life, actually published it because I think he wasn't allowed to put it up online, but I think I found it in a parking lot one day. And this undercover tape is a panel of abortionists talking about the problem of disposing of all the bodies. It's expensive. The one abortionist from Michigan was driving the bodies to the UP, Upper Peninsula, and then burning them, having bonfires. Another one said they had storage. I mean, they literally have storage units of dead children. Like it would be, if you actually had to bury, there have been laws, and Indiana's attempted it, and South Carolina attempted to force abortionists to have to pay to bury the bodies of babies. I mean, you would have football fields and football fields, because you're talking about over 900,000 a year now. It's unbelievable. So one of the things that they have found is through fetal tissue research, that's a win-win for the abortion industry, because then they don't have to worry about disposing of the bodies. They sell them to these organizations. So University of California, San Francisco, Stanford, University of Washington, other companies, they buy the bodies of the children and conduct research on them. And in San Francisco, for example, they have found out that, and they've admitted this, that the heart of the child when the child's being dismembered actually has to continue to beat, because in order to do certain research that they're doing at UCSF, they need the heart to continue to beat for as long as possible to have the freshest amount of organs. So they're actually, in those abortions, they will not give the child, and they don't in any abortion. Now, if you're doing surgery on a child this big, and you can do surgery on utero on a child this big in the womb, spina bifida, they can actually correct spina bifida, go in when the child's in utero. They will give the child anesthetic, right? Because they know the child can feel pain. In abortion, they don't give the child anything. And actually they can't. There's another abortion for later term after, and I'm sorry, I'm very cavalier when I'm talking about this.
No, I appreciate it, please.
This is the problem with being a pro-life activist, is that you talk about it so much, right? It's sometimes you have to remember what it is you're actually saying.
No, do it.
So this is this should be a 26-week baby. I would say it's probably 29, 30. But when you're doing a late-term abortion, now a lot of people argue with you that late-term abortions aren't real. They actually are. You can go to New Mexico. You can go to Nebraska. You can go to Maryland. There are many states where you can get a late-term abortion, meaning through the 9th month of pregnancy, where it's not illegal. To New York, Virginia is trying to do this. So in these types of abortions, what will happen is, what they'll do is, it's digoxin. And it's a drug that induces cardiac arrest, a heart attack. And so it's a needle, and it goes through the mother's abdomen, just like if she's going to get amniocentesis. This is how they could do an amniocentesis, right? They put a needle through the mother's abdomen, and they withdraw amniotic fluid to see if the child might have Down syndrome. What they do for this is the needle goes into, they use ultrasound. They try to get the needle into the child's heart, but they can do it wherever. And they'll insert digoxin into the child's heart. The goal of this is to induce a heart attack, to give the baby a heart attack. It's not instant. The child can live for 2 days. And then they will slowly induce a labor. They will give her lamaria, they will ripen her cervix, and then they will induce labor on her. And then 3 days later, she gives birth to a dead child. That's exactly what happens in late-term abortion. They used to do the partial birth abortions, where they would literally deliver the child. And when the child was squirming, still alive, they would come in with a sofa clamp. And actually, it would have to be forceps because the sofa clamp's too small. And they would crush the skull, and they would have basically a suction tube there. And then they would make sure when they saw the white coming out, that would be the brain tissue, and they knew they'd crushed the skull. And then they would deliver a dead child. And the law said that as long as the head was inside of her cervix, if the feet or arms were out, but as long as the baby's head was inside the cervix, it was illegal to commit that abortion. That is what Bill Clinton actually vetoed twice in the 90s, and President Bush signed into law. And then in 2007, finally, we had the victory at the Supreme Court. And you should read the Supreme Court. The majority ruling was actually, I think, written by Anthony Kennedy, saying just how gruesome these abortions are, that there's no way a humane society should ever allow these abortions to be committed. And they actually cited some women from Silent No More who, in the brief, they talked about all of these women who regret their abortions, but you should really read The Dissent by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This one-woman dissent about why partial birth abortion should be defended. It's evil. It's bad. But yeah, late-term abortions happen in our country. They usually happen for cases of fetal abnormality. A child's been diagnosed with something where a woman, she's being told that, your child's not going to survive very long outside of the womb, or your child might live a painful life. And so the left tries to use these really traumatic cases as a justification for it, but there's really no justification for it. Even if your child isn't going to survive, even if, why would you think that going in and ending your child's life, purposely destroying your child, would be a better end? It's not birthing your child, loving your child, holding your child as your child passes. It's going in and inducing a heart attack on your child. And it's really misguided compassion for a lot of families who are in this very painful decision. It's also, I think, a little bit part selfishness of parents are being told your child's going to have a lot of developmental delays. issues, this is going to be a hard life for you and your child, and this is not the life they wanted, right? They envisioned a healthy baby boy or baby girl. They did not envision a child who would have issues that would be expensive, that would fundamentally change their whole life. Like 2 of my children have cystic fibrosis. 90% of kids who have CF are killed in the womb through abortion. And the point that you hear often is, well, these children are going to suffer. Yes, my children will suffer, just like their other brothers will suffer, right? Everyone suffers. I think it's an unmistakable thing that every single human being is going to suffer in their life. And my children have to do extra work, and they will have to work harder than other people. But it doesn't mean their life doesn't have value. But what it does mean is that my husband and I, our lives have fundamentally changed. What we envisioned what our family was going to be like is not that way. My husband had to stop working, and he now homeschools. And, there's a lot of sacrifices that we have had to make sure our kids are healthy and happy. And there was an article in the New York Times, their magazine, The Cut, a couple years ago. A girl wrote about her son. She had a son, I think his name's Dudley, he has CF, and she suing the doctor because she had the chronic virus sampling test. It's done, the CVS test is done at the same time as amniocentesis, and it did not come back positive for CF, but yet her son was born with CF. And so she was suing for wrongful birth. And literally she's writing an article saying, I know this sounds terrible, but I wish he had never been born, and he's going to have this hard life. And really what she was talking about over and over again really wasn't her toddler having a hard life. It was that she was going to suffer. That, as a parent of a child with disabilities, is that a very real thing you have to think about is that you may survive your child, and the pain that will cause you. And that's a pain that's never going to go away. And she would rather not have ever had to experience that pain. And that's fundamentally sometimes when you hear this argument from people, that's really what they're saying, is they don't want to have to experience that pain, to grow attached to another human being for 12, 15 years, only for that child to die, because then you have to live with that pain. It's much better if I just get rid of that person before they're born and be sad for a little bit, but I won't be sad as long.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your work, all of your taking the time with me today, and you're amazing. I really appreciate, because this is the other thing too, just before we wrap up, people like Colin Kaepernick, say what you want about the kneeling, about the this, about the that. Number one, he's not a great quarterback.
It's
not that great. But number two, he has not really sacrificed, and yet he's lauded as a hero and given millions of dollars by Nike, et cetera, right? Given a contract with Disney Plus, et cetera, et cetera. You have 4 kids. 2 of them have cystic fibrosis. You've had things thrown at you. You've been spit on. You've been shouted at. You go across the country sacrificing your time and your life to do this because you believe in something, and yet you're not a hero. Regardless of whether you agree or not, let's look at the truth about who's a hero and who's not. I'm just saying. So,
well, we all do what we can and what we're called to do. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. What is your website? Where can people follow you?
Yeah, you can go to studentsforlife.org or studentsforlifeaction.org. My podcast website is explicitlyprolife.com, iTunes, Spotify, all those fun places. And then on Instagram, I think I'm Kristan Hawkins. I know I'm Kristan Hawkins on Facebook. Instagram, I think I might be Kristan Mercer. I'm Kristan Mercer Hawkins. Sorry. I don't know. It's my maiden name. I always forget to change. My husband always gets very mad. He's like, so feminist of you. So.
Well, awesome. And everybody go to Students for Life. It's a cool organization, and you can help out. Everybody make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening. Share this with your friends, whether they're less offendable or not. And find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano. You can find me on TikTok at CONSERVATISH, and Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff. And thank you so much again, Kristan. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.